this season of giving, some of those who've given the most, fighting for their country, have come upon hard times. Returning to the home of the brave for thousands of military vets has meant returning to no home at all. And many of those who fought America's wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, are finding their transition to civilian life overwhelming, sometimes complicated by post-traumatic stress disorder, substance abuse, unemployment, and difficulty adjusting to ordinary life after the extreme environment of combat. Thousands of veterans have been left homeless. ABC's Bob Woodruff takes a special look at the plight of these warriors without a home.
It has been over 9 years since the U.S. has been at war in Afghanistan and Iraq. Over 2 million U.S. service members have deployed, many returning to the front lines more than once. And since that initial shock and awe campaign, the VA estimates that over 9,000 of these men and women have been homeless.
Do you think Americans are shocked of how many veterans are now homeless from Iraq and Afghanistan?
I think they should be. The idea that some man or woman who got home from Iraq or Afghanistan maybe just a couple of months ago is homeless, that should outrage, I think, everybody in America.
It is hard to see them, but they are there. Was it ever this cold when you're sleeping here on the bench?
No, because last winter wasn't that cold.
Jose Pagan is a decorated veteran who survived 2 tours of duty in Iraq as a road clearance specialist. Just 3 days after leaving the military, he was homeless, living on the streets of the Bronx. How long was this your home?
For around a month and a half, 2 months.
A month and a half on the benches? Yes. Tell me how you laid down here?
Oh,
Can you show me?
Well, I mean, with the duffel bag takes around that much space. You know, then you have another duffel bag here. I don't really know how to. So this is duffel bag space. Then I have another duffel bag here laying. So it's pretty much like that. It was embarrassing, pretty embarrassing, especially as a veteran. Honor, pride, duty, loyalty, all these things that kick in as a soldier, you know. And then to find yourself here, you know, come on.
Something you never imagined.
Come on, never. I was a trained soldier, readily available at any time. In basic training, we say you eat now and taste later. So in Iraq, we said you fight now and you cry later. So
what about here?
Here, everything is backwards. You're just always constantly crying.
He's not alone. The VA believes there could be thousands more homeless vets, in part because of combat stress, traumatic brain injury, sexual trauma, divorce, or a rising use of drugs and alcohol.
People are very proud when they come back. They may not want to admit that they need some help.
In New York City, the VA has partnered with the Department of Homeless Services to help identify and house veterans in need, to avoid making the same mistakes that were made after the Vietnam War.
The Vietnam-era veterans, they were never properly reestablished in their communities when they returned. The country has learned a lot, the city has learned a lot, that you got to get it right at the beginning, and if you do that, it'll have lasting effects.
But some say changes are not being made fast enough. Troops are being called upon to serve over and over. Approximately 900,000 service members have been sent into harm's way more than once. Women included. In fact, women are becoming homeless faster than men.
Women are becoming homeless at twice the rate of men. They make up about 15% of the fighting force. And that's something the VA wasn't prepared for, nonprofits weren't prepared for, shelters weren't prepared for, and that's why we're seeing them end up homeless at such a higher rate.
Sergeant Katara Henry is one of those women. A chemical weapons specialist with the 101st Airborne, she served 2 deployments to Iraq. Her second tour of duty came only 4 months after her son was born. While in Iraq, her husband filed for divorce and was granted custody of their 2 kids.
When I found out about court and everything else, I said, you know what, I got to get a lawyer. So I was trying to deal with those things while I was in Iraq. So that's where all my money was going.
When she came back to the U.S., she slept on friends' couches and even in a car on the street. Today, she's at the Borden Avenue Veterans Residence in Queens with 26 other veterans from Iraq and Afghanistan.
This is my little, cubicle. This is where my clothes are. The love of my life. These are my children. These are my inspiration.
What do your kids think about you being homeless?
I don't tell my children that I'm homeless because I don't really think they will understand that. When I have them, I take them to beautiful hotels. The hardest thing for me was my son asked me, "Mommy, why do we keep moving?" He thinks that every time I take him to a hotel that we're moving to another place, and that hurt me to my soul.
You've never shown them this place at all.
They cannot come here.
While the federal government is trying to improve the system, nonprofit organizations are trying to fill the gaps. Here in New York, for example, the Jericho Project is working on the housing shortage, helping vets get the benefits they're entitled to, and most important of all, helping them find a place to call home.
Yeah, this was a vacant lot before we started, and it's going to be all state-of-the-art, new construction, so.
And this will be done by spring?
Yeah, we're looking February, March to move in our first veterans.
Jericho is currently constructing 2 veterans' residences that will offer permanent housing to vets from Iraq and Afghanistan.
We've seen people with less than a year of being discharged from the military were showing up in the homeless shelter. You know, that's why Jericho is building these now, because people are already coming back.
The current economy has only made things worse, especially for young veterans. Their unemployment rate is 20%. That's about double the national average. Michael Monroe is one of those vets. He was a combat medic in Iraq, and now he can't even find a job.
If you had a message for Americans watching this, what would be your message to them?
Don't just, once we get home, don't forget us.
But for Sergeant Henry, things are looking up.
We're not only trying to help her find permanent housing, we're also trying to house her temporarily before Christmas so that her children can spend Christmas with her.
Yes, I'm so excited. I'm trying not to cry.
The new home, huh?
Specialist Pagan is also one of the lucky ones. Jericho helped him too.
Everything changed. I have an apartment, and it was the first time, especially as a grown man, that I've gotten a gift like this.
And Bob Woodruff joins me now. Bob, thank you so much. That's very, very powerful. Some good news at the end, but so many thousands of veterans homeless. Why is it that Iraq and Afghanistan returning vets are becoming homeless faster than they did when they came back from Vietnam?
Well, you can see in Vietnam, they're going back to a civilian world that existed. So many came back. You look at the number, about 11% of Americans served in Vietnam. Now it's only about 1%. So when they come back, they're largely alone. They don't have the information about how they can get so much help. So they end up really temporarily as homeless, as opposed to Vietnam, which is after 5 to 10 years, it became permanent because the way they were treated when they came back, they're spat upon, and they didn't have any help at all.
But they're not finding that now, right? They're not finding that they're ostracized.
They're not ostracized. It's exactly that. Once they find out what they can do, that they can get it. That's the one that they say. It's not that there's not help available for them. They just don't know anything about it. And the ones that are coming out of all the wars, the numbers every day in homelessness, the VA says about 107,000 veterans are homeless every day now from all the wars, not Iraq and Afghanistan.
And some 9,000 or so from Iraq and Afghanistan.
That's what they say, yep.
Now, another issue that you're obviously intimately familiar with because you suffered traumatic injury from an IED in Iraq is the catastrophic injuries that many of these vets are coming back with. At the Walter Reed Hospital, you spoke to an Army corporal about the situation, about her possible recovery. Let's just play what you said to her and what she said to you.
How long do you think this recovery is going to take?
Maybe a lifetime for the mental, you never know.
I know that this has been a long road. Do you think you're going to spend a year walking better, to dealing with PTSD you've got, or do you think this is long-term for much of your life?
I think definitely the PTSD and TBI is more of a life thing. But the walking, I think we can overcome and just take it for what it is and be glad that I'm still here.
So TBI, traumatic brain injury, how are they getting the help? And is it better now than it was?
Well, that's getting a lot better than it ever was before. This was such a mystery when we came into this war. We did not really anticipate there'd be so many of these kinds of injuries in terms of IED explosions, what we call invisible injuries, these wounds you can't see sometimes. So those that have it, there's still this stigma problem. People don't want to necessarily admit or talk publicly about that they've got something like PTSD, combat stress. But that's changing very quickly. So as that happens and we learn more about the brain, we know about the livers, we know about the kidneys, but we just don't know much about the brains. That's getting better, but that's going to take some time.
And in terms of the attention that the American people are paying to this, many of them are out of sight and therefore out of mind. I also want to play what Corporal Coleman said about that.
Do you think that us in the media are just not reporting enough about what's happening?
If a soldier gets killed, y'all cover it. I think it's important that y'all cover more about the wounded warriors, and because, I mean, look around, there's hundreds of wounded warriors here. Walter Reed's overflowing with patients.
You are a wounded warrior in our ranks, in the ranks of journalism. What do you say on this holiday weekend to what she just told you?
Well, I think anytime somebody meets somebody that was injured, they want to do everything they can. I've definitely seen that. A lot of times just in your community, in your neighborhood, you might not know anybody because it's only about 1% of the people in the country are serving. If you do meet them, you want to do it. It's just, I think when people don't want to do something, it's because it's a different world. You know, the rest of us have a different world, and their world is over here. Once it comes together,
and you have really, with your wife Lee, taken on this mission of raising funds, of raising awareness for the walking wounded who come back.
There is so much nonprofit help, as you're seeing. Something like Jericho, for example, helping the homeless, because there's gaps. You know, the government is doing a lot, more and more all the time, but there needs all these holes we got to fill up. What happens between Walter Reed and then their community when they get home. So you fill this gap and you help them everything from education to help to physical help to health care. All those things need to be done in the private world as well.
Bob, thank you very much indeed.